It was a crisp November morning in my little house on the outskirts of Chicago. It's the kind of morning where the air smells like fallen leaves, and you can almost feel Thanksgiving waiting around the corner. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping chamomile tea, watching the first snowflakes dust the backyard. My phone buzzed on the scratched oak table, and my heart did that familiar skip it always did when I saw Sarah's name on the screen. My daughter. Even at 62, after all these years, her name still brought a flicker of hope. Maybe she was calling to talk about Thanksgiving plans. Maybe she'd asked me to make my pecan pie again, the one she used to beg for as a kid. I opened the message. "We want a quiet Thanksgiving with family this year. Mom, please don't come." I read it twice, then 3 times. The words didn't sink in at first, like my brain was refusing to let them. Don't come to Thanksgiving. The holiday I'd spent 30 years perfecting. The holiday where I'd wake up at dawn to brine the turkey, set the table with my mother's old linen, arrange every detail so my daughter, her husband Michael, and my grandkids, Lily and Ethan, could feel the warmth of family. My hands started to shake, not the usual tremor of age, but something deeper. Like the ground beneath me had cracked open. I set the phone down and stared at those words until they blurred. 30 years of Thanksgivings. 30 years of folding napkins into little fans, of saving up to buy the kids' favorite cranberry sauce, of watching their faces light up when I brought out the dessert tray. And now, with one text, it was over. I picked up the phone again, my fingers clumsy, and typed back, "Enjoy." One word. That's all I could manage without breaking apart. The silence in my small house felt heavier than ever. I looked around. At the Thanksgiving decorations I'd put up last week, paper turkeys the kids made in elementary school. A centerpiece I'd crafted from pine cones and ribbon. There was a photo on the fridge, faded now, of Sarah and me laughing over a batch of burnt cookies when she was 10. Back when she still thought I was enough, but things had changed. They changed when Sarah married Michael, a lawyer with a big house and a bigger ego. Suddenly, my homemade pies weren't good enough compared to the catered spreads Michael's mother, Diane, brought. My stories about Sarah's childhood, the ones I thought tied us together, became old-fashioned. To Michael. Last Thanksgiving, I'd overheard him whisper to Sarah, "Why does your mom always make such a fuss? It's just dinner." My grandkids, Lily and Ethan, barely looked up from their phones when I tried to talk to them. Lily, 18 now, rolled her eyes when I pulled out my old sketchbook to show her the drawings I used to do. Ethan, 15, just shrugged when I offered to teach him how to carve a pumpkin. The worst part wasn't the rejection itself. It was how casual it was. "We want a quiet Thanksgiving." As if I was the noise they needed to silence. As if 40 years of raising Sarah alone after her dad died. Of working late nights at the community college teaching art classes. Of skipping my own dreams so she could have hers meant nothing. I wandered to the living room and stopped at a corner, where an old easel stood, holding a half-finished painting from my 20s. Back when I thought I'd be an artist, before life and bills and motherhood took over. The canvas was dusty, the colors faded, but it reminded me of a time when I felt like I could create something beautiful, something worth seeing. I touched the edge of the painting and for a moment wondered if that part of me was still in there somewhere, buried under years of being just mom. I sat back down at the table, the tea cold now, and let the hurt settle in. Sarah didn't want me there. My own daughter. My family. And yet as the snow fell outside, I felt something else stirring, a tiny spark of defiance. Maybe I didn't have to keep fading into the background. Maybe it was time to stop being the person they could so easily push away. I sat there in my quiet house, the snow falling heavier now, blanketing the world outside in silence. That text from Sarathos. Cold, sharp words kept echoing in my head. "Don't come." I'd spent 40 years building a life for her, scraping by on a teacher's salary, staying up late to grade papers so I could afford her ballet lessons, her college applications, her dreams. And now I was the one who didn't fit in her perfect Thanksgiving picture. I walked to my bedroom and opened the top drawer of my dresser, where I kept a small wooden box. Inside were letters from Sarah, folded carefully, yellowed with time. Letters from when she was in high school, thanking me for the extra shifts I took to buy her a prom dress. A note from college, scribbled on notebook paper, saying, "Mom, you're my hero." Another from when Lily was born, calling me the best grandma she could imagine. When had it all changed? When had I gone from hero to someone who could be dismissed with a text? I think it started when Sarah married Michael. He came from money, real money. The kind of money that bought lakefront houses and European vacations. Suddenly, my little house in the suburbs, with its creaky floors and mismatched furniture, wasn't good enough. My homemade quilts, the ones I'd spent months stitching for Lily and Ethan, were sweet, but not as exciting as the designer. Clothes Michael's mother, Diane, sent. My stories about Sarah's childhood, how we'd paint together in the backyard. Laughing when we got more paint on ourselves than the canvas became embarrassing to Michael. I'd overheard him once at a family dinner muttering to Sarah about how I was stuck in the past, but I kept trying, kept showing up, kept bringing my pies, kept hoping they'd see me as more than the poor relation they had to tolerate. Because that's what family does, right? You stick together no matter what. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. For a split second, my heart leapt. Maybe Sarah had realized how cruel her text was. Maybe she was calling to take it back. But it wasn't Sarah. It was Evelyn. My old friend from the community college where I used to teach art, Clara. "Dear, I hope I'm not intruding," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "James and I are hosting a Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow at the gallery downtown. We'd love for you to join us. It's a bit fancy, but we'd be thrilled to have you." Evelyn owned a small but prestigious art gallery in Chicago's River North. We'd stayed in touch over the years, mostly through quick coffee dates or chats about art. She and her husband, James, moved in circles I'd only read about in magazines. Collectors. People who thought nothing of dropping thousands on a painting. I hesitated. "I don't want to impose," I said, the words automatic. "Nonsense," Evelyn laughed. "We're having it catered by Alinea, and honestly, Clara, we could use your spark there. Some of these art types can be so stuffy, Alinea. Seen it in food magazines, the kind of place where a single meal costs more than my monthly grocery budget." My first instinct was to say no, to retreat back to my safe, small world. But then I glanced at my phone, at Sarah's text still glowing on the screen. "Don't come." Maybe it was time to stop shrinking myself to fit into their idea of me. "I'd love to come," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "What should I bring? Just you, Clara? Cocktails at 6, dinner at 8. Wear something fabulous. It's a dressy affair." After I hung up, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. 62 years old with silver streaks in my hair, I'd stopped dying. Wearing a cardigan I'd bought on clearance at Macy's. What was I thinking? Saying yes to a dinner with Chicago's art elite? But then I thought of Sarah's text again. The way it assumed I'd just fade away quietly. No, not this time. I walked to my closet and pulled out a dress I'd made years ago for a friend's wedding but never worn again. Deep emerald green with a flowing skirt that made me feel like I was floating. I'd spent weeks sewing it, back when I still dreamed of creating things that mattered. I tried it on, and it still fit, hugging my curves in a way that felt elegant. Not tired. I paired it with a simple silver necklace, a gift from my mother, the one piece of jewelry I owned that felt timeless. As I hung the dress on the closet door, my phone buzzed again. A text from Michael this time. "Thanks for understanding, Clara. The kids are excited for a low-key Thanksgiving." I stared at the message, then deleted it without replying. Tomorrow, while they had their quiet holiday, I'd be somewhere else, somewhere I was wanted. For the first time all day, I felt a small, defiant smile tug at my lips. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the sting of Sarah's text, so final, so cold. Or maybe it was the thought of walking into Evelyn's gallery tonight, a place where I might actually belong. Something had shifted inside me, like a door creaking open after being locked for decades. I made my coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. For the first time in months, I logged into a bank account I'd kept hidden from everyone, even Sarah. $6,400,000. The number stared back at me, as unreal now as it had been 3 years ago when I'd first seen it. It wasn't an inheritance, not some windfall from a distant aunt like you read about in novels. It was mine, earned from selling a handful of paintings I'd done in my 20s, back when I thought I could be an artist. Evelyn had found them in storage a few years back, during a spring cleaning at the community college. Clara, she'd said, these are extraordinary. She'd taken them to her gallery, shown them to a few collectors, and before I knew it, they'd sold one for $50,000, another for $200,000, then a series that went at auction for millions. I'd told her to keep my name out of it, to call me the anonymous artist. I didn't want Sarah to know. I wanted her to build her own life, to learn the value of hard work the way I had, how wrong I'd been. All those years, Sarah borrowing money from me, $100 for groceries, $1,000 for a car repair, $10,000 when Lily needed braces. She'd promised to pay me back, but the promises faded, replaced by sighs when I couldn't afford to take the kids to Hawaii or buy them the latest gadgets. Michael's mother, Diane, was the one who swooped in with those things: private school tuition, ski trips, a shiny new bike for Ethan. Diane always sat at the head of the table at family dinners while I was sent to the kitchen to reheat the gravy. I'd let it happen, thinking humility was the price of love, thinking sacrifice was my role. But that morning, staring at those numbers, I realized something. Sarah didn't respect me not because I hadn't earned it, but because I'd never demanded it. I closed the laptop and walked to my easel in the living room. The half-finished painting from my 20s sat there, a swirl of blues and golds, a cityscape I'd started when I still believed in my own dreams. I picked up a brush, dipped it in paint, and made a single stroke. It felt like breathing again. That evening I stepped into Evelyn's gallery, the emerald dress catching the light, my mother's silver necklace gleaming against my collarbone. The space was everything my little house wasn't. High ceilings, white walls lined with vibrant paintings, crystal flutes of champagne sparkling under chandeliers. I recognized faces from art magazines, a sculptor whose work was in the Art Institute, a critic who wrote for the Tribune. Evelyn greeted me with a hug. "Clara, you're radiant," she said, handing me a glass. Then she led me to a corner of the gallery, where one of my old paintings hung, a bold, abstract piece done after Sarah's dad died, full of raw grief and hope. "I put it up tonight," Evelyn whispered. "People can't stop talking about it." I froze, staring at my own work, displayed like it mattered. A woman in a sleek black dress approached, introducing herself as a curator from a local museum. "This piece," she said, gesturing to my painting. "It's haunting. Who's the artist?" Evelyn winked at me, but stayed quiet. I just smiled and said, "Someone who's been away from the canvas too long." The night unfolded like a dream. I talked with artists about color theory, debated composition with a gallery owner, laughed with a collector who insisted I had an eye for beauty. For the first time in years, I wasn't Sarah's mom or Lily and Ethan's grandma. I was Clara, a woman with thoughts worth hearing, stories worth telling. Over dinner catered by Alinea, every bite a revelation, a painter named Sophia leaned over and said, "Clara, you should join our artist collective. We need voices like yours." A collective? Me? I almost laughed at the idea, but her eyes were serious. "I'd be honored," I said, and meant it. When I got home, past midnight, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by my living room window, watching the city lights. My phone had been silent all day, no texts from Sarah. No calls from the grandkids asking for my sweet potato casserole. They were having their quiet Thanksgiving without me. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I opened my easel again the next morning. I painted for hours, then days, then weeks. Evelyn encouraged me, sneaking my new pieces into her gallery. One sold for $75,000 without my name attached. Then another. By January, I'd bought a new apartment to sleek, modern place near the Loop, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Lake Michigan. I hired a stylist who taught me how to dress for this new life. Trading cardigans for tailored jackets, clearance rack finds for silk scarves. I started a small art class at a community center, teaching kids who reminded me of the girl I used to be. Every brushstroke, every conversation at a gallery opening, every morning waking up in a home that felt like Minute was like rediscovering a part of myself I'd buried under years of motherhood. I wasn't just Clara anymore. I was Clara Thompson, the artist. The woman who belonged in rooms full of people who saw her. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew Sarah and Michael. Had no idea who I was becoming. By March, my life felt like a painting I'd only dreamed of creating. My new apartment near the Loop was a canvas of light and space marble counters, a studio room with an easel by the window, and a view of Lake Michigan that made my heart ache with its beauty. I was painting again, every day, colors spilling out of me like they'd been waiting decades to escape. Evelyn had sold 3 more of my pieces, always as the anonymous artist, and the art world was buzzing. A critic in the Chicago Tribune called my work a revelation of quiet strength. I clipped the article and tucked it into a drawer. Not quite ready to believe it was about me. I'd changed in other ways too. My stylist had me in tailored blazers and silk dresses that made me stand taller. I joined Sophia's Artist Collective, where I spent evenings debating brush techniques and the politics of gallery spaces. I was invited to charity auctions, gallery openings, even a private dinner with a curator who wanted my input on a new exhibit. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just Sarah's mom or Lily and Ethan's grandma. I was Clara Thompson, someone whose opinions mattered, whose presence was requested, not tolerated. But my family. They hadn't called since Thanksgiving. Not a single text from Sarah, not a word from Michael. Lily and Ethan sent me a quick Merry Christmas message, but it felt like an afterthought, probably prompted by their mother. I'd spent the holidays with Evelyn and James, sipping wine in their Lakeview penthouse, surrounded by people who asked about my latest painting, not my pecan pie recipe. I didn't miss the old family dinners, the ones where I'd bustle in. The kitchen while Diane, Michael's mother, held court with stories of her latest trip to Paris. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Knowing my own daughter hadn't even checked if I was okay then, in April, everything changed. Evelyn called me one morning, her voice trembling with excitement. "Clara, one of your paintings, the big one, City at Dawn, sold at auction last night. For $1.2 million. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I'd painted that piece in my 20s, pouring my grief and hope into it after Sarah's dad died. Evelyn had convinced me to let it go to auction, still under anonymous artist. Now it was on the front page of an art blog, with a headline, "Mystery Painter Stuns Chicago Art Scene." I didn't realize how far that article would travel. A week later, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Clara, hope you're doing well. The kids miss you. The kids miss you. Not we miss you." I stared at the message, trying to decode it. Michael had never texted me directly before Sarah, always handled the family communication. I didn't respond. 2 days later, a text from Sarah. "Mom, Lily's art show is next week. She'd love for you to come. Interesting." Lily's last art show had been in December, right before Thanksgiving. I'd asked if I could attend, and Sarah had said it was just for close family. Now, suddenly, I was invited. I showed. The texts to Evelyn over coffee at a cafe overlooking the Chicago River. "Sounds like someone's been reading the art blogs," she said, raising an eyebrow. "How long since you've heard from them?" Since they told me to stay away? From Thanksgiving, I said. Evelyn's face hardened. She'd heard this story before, over late night talks about family and what it means to be seen. And now they want you back. Convenient? It was convenient. Suspiciously so. That evening, as I was setting up my easel, my doorman called. "Ms. Thompson, there's a delivery for you." It was a bouquet of peonies and lilies, the kind that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a week. The card read, "Thinking of you, Mom, love, Sarah, Michael, Lily, and Ethan." I stared at it, the words feeling foreign. Love. When? Had they last said that to me? I opened my laptop and Googled my name. The results made my breath catch. There I was, in photos from gallery openings, charity events, even a small feature in an art magazine. Clara Thompson, the anonymous artist, behind Chicago's most talked about paintings. Clara Thompson, standing next to a senator at a fundraiser. Clara Thompson, laughing with a gallery owner in a silk dress that cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. They hadn't missed me. They'd missed my bank account. The call started the next morning. Sarah at 7 a.m. while I was stretching in my home studio with my yoga instructor. I let it go to voicemail. By noon, my phone showed 12 missed calls, all from her. I sipped my coffee, looking out at the lake, and listened to the first message. "Mom, it's Sarah. I really need to talk to you. Can you call me back? It's urgent." Her voice had that edge I hadn't heard since she was a teenager asking for money for a school trip. The fifth voicemail was more direct. "Mom, I saw the article about your painting. $1.2 million. We need to talk. Please call me." There it was, the truth laid bare. They hadn't called because they regretted shutting me out. They'd called because they'd seen dollar signs. I invited Sarah over that afternoon, between a meeting with my art collective and a dinner with a museum board member. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. She was still beautiful with her father's. Dark eyes, but she looked tired, her designer blouse wrinkled, her hair pulled back haphazardly. She stepped into my apartment, her jaw dropping at the marble floors, the floor-tisseling windows, the painting, my painting, hanging above the fireplace. "Mom, this place," she said, her voice trailing off. "How did you coffee?" I asked, gesturing to the pot my housekeeper had brewed that morning. "You have a housekeeper." She sank into a leather chair, still staring around like she'd walked into a museum. "Sit," I said, my voice calm but firm. I wore a tailored blazer and a silk scarf, the kind of outfit that said I belonged here. "What do you need to talk about?" She hesitated, clearly thrown by my directness. I'd never been direct with Sarah. I'd always been the one to smooth things over, to offer help before she even asked. "I didn't know you were." "This," she said, gesturing at the apartment. "The paintings, the money. Why didn't you tell me?" I took a sip of my coffee, letting the question hang in the air. "Tell you what, exactly? That I sold a few paintings? That I've been an artist all along, even when you and Michael laughed at my sketches?" Her face flushed. "We didn't laugh. I mean, I didn't realize they were worth that much." $6 million, I said, watching her eyes widen. "From paintings I did years ago when I was young and thought I could be something more than just your mom." I kept it quiet because I wanted you to make your own way. "But you didn't respect me anyway." Sarah looked down at her hands. "Mom, I know I messed up at Thanksgiving. I'm sorry. But things are hard right now. Michael's firm is struggling. We're behind on the mortgage. I thought maybe you could help." There it was. It's the real reason she was here. "I'll help," I said, and her face lit up with relief. "I'll pay the $40,000 you need for Michael's debts. But this is the last time. Consider it a final payment." "Final payment?" she asked, confused. "I'm done being your safety net," I said. "It's for 20 years. I've bailed you out $200 here, $5,000 there. I kept track. It's $38,000 you've borrowed and never paid back. This $40,000 makes us even. No more loans. No more fixing your problems. I'm an artist, Sarah, not an ATM." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she saw me not as her mother, but as a woman with her own life, her own boundaries. "Mom, you didn't mean to treat me like I was disposable?" asked, my voice steady but sharp. "You didn't mean to make me feel like my love, my time, my sacrifices were worth less than Diane's money." She started to cry, but I didn't soften. "Not this time. I love you, Sarah," I said. "But love isn't enough anymore. I need respect too. And until you can give me that, we're done here." I walked her to the door, my painting glowing on the wall behind us, a reminder of who I'd always been, even when they couldn't see it. After that conversation with Sarah, I felt lighter, like I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying for decades. I'd drawn a line, clear and firm, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what might happen if I stopped being the one who always said yes. My days filled up with color literally and figuratively. I painted every morning in my studio, the lake sparkling outside my window, each brushstroke a small act of reclaiming myself. I taught art classes at the community center, watching kids light up when they mixed their first perfect shade of blue. I went to gallery openings, sipped champagne with collectors, and even spoke at a small panel about emerging artists. I was living a life I'd never dared imagine, one where I was seen, not just needed, but family has a way of pulling you back, doesn't it? About a month after our talk, my phone buzzed while I was sketching in my studio. It was Lily, my 8th granddaughter, calling from her dorm at Northwestern. "Grandma Clara," she said, her voice soft, almost shy. "Is this a bad time?" "Never a bad time for you, sweetheart," I said, setting my pencil down. My heart caught a little Lily. Hadn't called me just to talk in years. I saw. "You're painting in the Tribune," she said. "The one that sold for $1 million? I didn't know you were that good." There was a pause, then a rush of words. "I mean, I knew you painted, but I thought it was just like a hobby." "I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have paid more attention." Her honesty hit me like a warm breeze. Lily, with her sharp wit and quiet intensity, had always been the one I thought I'd connect with most. But she'd been caught up in her parents' world, Michael's money, Diane's gifts, the pressure to be perfect. "It's okay," I said. "You were a kid. You're allowed to miss things." "Can I come see you?" she asked. "Want to see your studio, maybe? Learn a little about painting." That Saturday, Lily showed up at my apartment, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes wide as she took in the space. "This is unreal," she said, running her fingers along the edge of my easel. "You really live here?" I laughed. "I do now." We spent the afternoon painting together. I showed her how to blend colors, how to let the brush move like it had a mind of its own. She told me about her college classes, her dream of studying art history. How she'd always felt like she had to hide that from her dad because he thought it was impractical. I listened, really listened, and for the first time, I saw her. Not just as my granddaughter, but as a young woman finding her own path. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "For Thanksgiving, we're not seeing you before." "You're here now," I said, and meant it. Ethan was next. My 15-year-old grandson called a few weeks later, his voice nervous but eager. "Grandma, can I come over? I want to learn how to draw like you. Dad says you're like famous now." I smiled at that. Famous. What a strange word for a woman who'd spent most of her life invisible. Ethan came over every other Sunday, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. We'd sit in my studio and I'd teach him how to shade, how to capture light on paper. He'd tell me stories about school, about his soccer team, about how his parents were always fighting now. "Dad's stressed about money," he said one day, sketching a tree. "Mom says it's because of his firm. I don't know. I just miss how things used to be." I nodded, letting him talk. I didn't offer to fix. That wasn't my role anymore. Instead, I told him stories about his mom when she was his age, how she'd spend hours drawing with me, how she'd once painted our old dog in bright purple just to make me laugh. Ethan grinned. I want to hear more about that stuff. He said, nobody else tells me. By October, something shifted with Sarah. She called one evening, her voice quieter than usual. Mom, she said, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about respect. I was wrong about Thanksgiving, about a lot of things. I'd like you to come this year, not to cook or clean or anything like that, just to be with us. As our guest, I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say yes, to slip back into the familiar warmth of family. But another part, the part that had spent a year building a life where I was valued, held firm. I'll come, I said finally. But only if it's different this time. I'm not the person I was last year, Sarah. I need you to see that. She was quiet for a moment. I do see it, she said. And I'm trying, Mom. I really am. Thanksgiving arrived, and I walked into Sarah's house not as the mom who'd bustle in with casseroles, but as Clara, in a silk dress and a confidence I'd earned. Sarah had set a place for me at the head of the table next to her, not Diane. Michael was quieter than usual. Maybe because he knew I wasn't here to fix his problems. Lily showed me a drawing she'd done for her art class, inspired by one of my paintings. Ethan insisted on serving me dessert, grinning as he set a slice of pecan pie in front of me. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, old habits that lingered. But for the first time, I felt like they were trying to see me not as a role to fill, but as a person. And that was enough for now. The real surprise came a week later. Lily called, her voice bubbling with excitement. Grandma, I submitted a painting to a student exhibit, one I did after we worked together. Got picked for a show at a local museum. I could hear the pride in her voice, and it warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. I told them it was inspired by you, she said. Is that okay? I laughed, tears prickling my eyes. It's more than okay, sweetheart, honored. That night, as I stood in my studio, looking at a new canvas I'd started, I realized something. I wasn't just rebuilding my relationship with my family. I was showing them who I'd always been, a woman with dreams, with talent, with a life worth living. And maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see it too. A year after that painful Thanksgiving text, I stood in my studio, surrounded by canvases bursting with color. The morning light poured through my windows, painting Lake Michigan in shades of silver and blue. I was preparing for my first solo exhibition at Evelyn's Gallery. A collection of paintings, I'd poured my heart into, each one a piece of the woman I'd rediscovered. One of them, a vibrant cityscape called New Dawn, had just been acquired by the Art Institute of Chicago. They'd called it a masterpiece of resilience. I still couldn't quite believe it was mine. Last week, Evelyn had pulled me aside at a gallery event. Clara, she said, her eyes bright, the Arts Council wants you to join as an advisor. They think your perspective, your story could shape their programs for years. An advisor. Me, helping decide how millions of dollars would support young artists, kids, like the ones I taught at the community center. I'd said yes, feeling a pride I'd never known before. I walked to my window, wrapped in a soft cashmere shawl that cost more than I used to spend on rent. The city stretched out below, alive and sparkling, and I felt completely at peace. I'd spent decades making myself small, thinking love meant sacrifice without recognition. But this past year, I'd learned something different. Real love requires respect. And sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing yourself. My phone buzzed. A photo from Lily at her museum exhibit, standing proud next to her painting. A text from Ethan showing a sketch he'd done of our old dog with the caption, "Grandma, you inspired this." A voicemail from Sarah inviting me to a quiet dinner, just the two of us, to catch up, really catch up. They were learning to see me not as a role to fill, but as Clara Artist's grandmother. Woman with a life worth knowing. I raised my coffee mug to the empty studio. To the life I'd built, to the woman I'd become. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and here's what I've learned, my friends. You are never too old to claim your worth. You are never too old to set boundaries, to demand respect, to paint your own story. Sometimes the people you love most need to learn to miss you properly before they can love you fully. And when they do, it's because you chose yourself first. So tell Mayav you ever had to step away to find yourself. What would you do in my place? Share your story below and let me know where you're watching from. Your voice matters, just like mine does now. The greatest act of love is choosing yourself not out of selfishness, but out of strength. When you value your own worth, you teach others to value it too. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to relationships built on respect. And no matter your age, it's never too late to start a new chapter, to paint a life that's yours alone.